How to avoid incriminating yourself when you are arrested. I know what you're thinking, I'd never be arrested. However, as we've seen in recent times, it appears that all it takes is one allegation and you can find yourself in the back of a police van. And in this video, we're going to go over the things what will happen when you are arrested, the process which will be followed, what a custody suite is actually like, what your rights are, and more importantly, how to not incriminate yourself if you do find yourself in this unfortunate position. The effect on someone being arrested can be life-changing. I know people that have had mental breakdowns, I know people that have not been able to go home for a long period of time, people that have reacted and said the wrong thing under caution, which has then led to their incrimination, and I've even heard of people taking their own lives. So the first thing what will happen is the police will arrive. Now, the police knocking on anybody's door is going to increase anxiety. You're going to be wondering why they're there. And of course, naturally, our minds go to something bad has happened, because the police never knock on the door just to ask how your day is going. If the police turn up, don't fight them. You'll make it worse for yourself. Don't try and run, you'll definitely make it worse for yourself. And just comply. You're not going to talk your way out of being arrested if the police are there to arrest you. When you're arrested, you can ask why you've been arrested, and they should tell you why you've been arrested. At the time of arrest, they probably can't go into too much detail. It'll just be an allegation has been made against you and we need to investigate it. Then what will happen is you'll be cautioned. Okay, so a caution is you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention in question something which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. So what that caution means, broken down, is you don't have to say anything, you have the right to remain silent. However, if during the investigation you don't say anything, for example during a police interview, which we'll get onto later, then that silence can be used against you because the court may draw an inference from your silence. In layman's terms, what that means is when you are being asked questions, if you don't decide to answer when you're under caution during the police interview and then decide to say something later, that can be used against you because you have your opportunity to say your side of the story, but you're choosing not to. And of course, anything what you do say can be used in court. This is where people can trip up by making what's called a significant statement because emotions are high at the time of arrest. So you get arrested, they say you're under arrest for assault. You might say something like, I haven't touched them, they hit me first, or I only touched them once. That's a significant statement and you can actually be asked about those comments later on. The advice I would give is if you are arrested, don't say anything. Do not argue, do not try to protest your innocence, just accept you're being arrested, and then later on, when it is your time to speak, that is when you can put your story across. When you are arrested, it's important to remain calm. Then you'll be taken to the custody suite. This is either in the back of a police van, in which you will be in a cell, or in the back of a police car, and normally you'll be handcuffed to the rear. Handcuffs are uncomfortable, and if they are too tight, you can request that the officer check them. Now, the only check what the officer has to do is to see whether they can pinch their fingers in between the bar. If they can fit their fingers between the bar, then that is classed as being loose enough. If you are calm and compliant, then the officers will take the handcuffs off as soon as possible, probably when you get to the custody suite. If you're being argumentative and aggressive, they're more likely to stay on. When you arrive at the custody suite, you'll probably go through some gates or some shutters. You're then taken into the custody suite and then you'll be taken into something called a holding area. What the holding area is it's the point in between the entrance to the custody suite and going into the sergeant's charging desk, the main area. In that holding area, you may be on your own or there may be other people there. You may be sat on a bench or you may be asked to sit in a holding cell. How long you can be in that holding cell is up to how busy the custody suite is. I've been sat in custody holding cells for up to 3 hours before because the custody suite's been too busy. Or it could be you can go straight through. It's simply luck of the draw of how busy the sergeants are when you arrive at custody. The moment you go into that custody suite, you will be on camera and what you say is being recorded. So just bear that in mind if you do decide to talk about your defence or the reasons why you're there. Now, before you get put into the cell, there is another part which happens, and we're going to talk about what happens in the custody cell in just a moment. But the next part of the process is you are taken from the custody holding cells into the actual custody suite itself. Custody suites are very busy. There are sergeants, there are police officers, there's detention officers, there's other prisoners. They can be quite loud, lots of beeping, lots of shouting, lots of banging. It can be quite an intimidating place, certainly if you've never been there before. What happens is you will walk in and you'll be stood in front of the charge desk. Now, this is where the custody sergeant sits. When you are stood in front of the custody sergeant, they will ask you a series of questions: your name, address, date of birth, etc. Then what happens is you will be further searched. While this is happening, the officer will explain to the custody sergeant why you've been arrested and the reason and necessity for your arrest, to ensure that the arrest is lawful, legal and necessary. What then happens is the custody sergeant will ask you a series of questions to do with your welfare, any medication you might be on, and you also get given your rights. Now, your rights when you're in custody are as follows. You have the right to inform somebody that you've been arrested. be that a family member, etc. This is when people say, I want my phone call, I want to speak to somebody on the phone. You'll be offered to read the codes of practice, which is the law book in how you need to be treated at custody. And then the most important one, in my opinion, you have the right to free and legal independent advice. You have the right to speak to a solicitor. Whether you decide to have a solicitor or not is entirely up to you. Personally, I would always advise it, because I know people who have been arrested and they've said, I've not done anything wrong, why do we need a lawyer? It's not a case of whether you need a lawyer because you are innocent or guilty. It's a case of the lawyer gets certain privileges which you do not. They get to hear evidence which you do not before the police interview, and they can advise you on what to and what not to say during your police interview. Asking for a solicitor is not an admission of guilt, it's one of your legal rights, and if you've never been in this position before where you've been arrested and you're in custody, why would you not take advantage of a free service of somebody who can help and support you? Once your time at the charge desk has been finished, you will be then taken to be docked, okay? And this is where you'll have your fingerprints taken and you'll also have your photograph taken. We'll get back to the video in just a second, but first I want to tell you about my best-selling police memoir, The Job's Fucked: Secret Diary of a Police Officer. I wrote this book after 10 years service in the police force, and I do not hold back on what I saw. Corruption, low morale of officers, some funny stories in there too, some dark humour, and lots of other good stuff. You can pick up the book now from Amazon, the link is in the description of this video, or why not treat yourself to a signed copy from my website. So if you want to really find out what happens in the police, and if you want to read the book the police do not want you to read, then check it out. The book is available on Kindle, paperback and audio. Then you are taken to your cell, and a cell is a small confined room. There is a toilet, there is a CCTV camera. You can't see the toilet on the CCTV camera, I can promise you that. There is a mattress, an overhead light and a pillow. The mattress and pillow are made out of plastic. They're not the most comfortable things in the world. It can be very difficult if you're in a custody cell because there's nothing to do. It's important that you try not to overthink or panic. You can ask for a book, you can maybe do some exercise, but there's no escaping that. You are locked in. It can feel quite claustrophobic. Now, if you followed my advice, then you shouldn't be worried about something you may have said or how you may have acted leading up to that point. You should be informed of when your solicitor is on the way, any updates, etc. And every half an hour to an hour, the detention officers have to come round and check on your welfare, check if you're okay, and if they can, answer any questions. Detention officers don't know the ins and outs of the case, they don't know your personal situation. So if they don't know the answer to something, please don't get aggressive with them, and if they can, they will find out for you, but this isn't always guaranteed. It can be very frustrating, and sitting in that cell for a long period of time with nothing to do, not knowing what time it is, not knowing what's going to happen, can be very distressing. But it's important, as much as you can, try to keep your head screwed on, because it's not a nice situation. Been there myself, I know plenty of people that have been there, and I've of course dealt with people on the other side of the cell door. It's not a nice situation. People are working as fast as they can to get that sorted and to get you out of that custody suite as fast as possible. You can be held up to 24 hours in the police station. However, it can be extended under extreme circumstances. When you're in a cell, you will be given food and drink. Generally, the meals are microwavable meals and they're not the best. They don't taste very nice, but it's something to eat and it's something to do. How I occupied myself when I was in the police cell was I would have a cup on the floor and I would have a book and I would throw the book in the air, and whatever page it landed on would be how many times around the cup I would walk. It was awful, it was agonizing. I felt like I was going insane because I don't do the best in confined spaces anyway, and I don't do the best at relaxing and, you know, trying not to freak the fuck out when there's malicious allegations being made against you. So just to be prepared, it's not a nice situation. You're not going to enjoy it, but you're not going to be in there forever, and this process will eventually end. Then it comes to your police interview, and this is why I said get a solicitor, because what will happen is the solicitor will arrive at the custody suite, and then the solicitor and the officer who will be interviewing you, the officer that's investigating the case, will then go into what's called disclosure. This is where the police will tell the solicitor what evidence they have against you, whether a statement's been made, any CCTV, etc. The police only have to give so much information to the solicitor, but the solicitor absolutely can pry, can ask questions on your behalf to then get as much information as possible in order to advise you accordingly when you are going into the police interview. Once disclosure is completed, the officers will come and get you from your cell and will take you to the consultation room. This is where you'll meet your solicitor. The solicitor will ask what your side of the story is. They will present whatever evidence the police have told them that they have, and then they will advise you accordingly on what to do in the police interview. These can be things such as no comment, remain silent, a prepared statement, which means that the solicitor writes down your defense and then you don't say anything else. Or it can be admit what you've done or tell your side of the story if you're denying it. If you didn't have a solicitor, then that means you're going into the interview room without any prior knowledge as to what allegation or evidence is against you and what evidence the police have. That's why I said get a solicitor, it's free. And if you do find yourself on the wrong side of the cell door, you want to make sure that you have the best chance possible at having a fair police interview. Then you'll go into the interview room. Now the interview rooms are generally very small and the table in the center of the interview room is nailed to the floor, and so will be your chair. This is probably because somebody at some point has tried to attack somebody with a chair, therefore it's been bolted to the floor. Then there is a tape recorder. Generally it's digitally recorded. Some places still use tapes, but generally it's digitally recorded. What I used to do is I used to explain what was going to happen before I turned on the interview recording to the detainee in the presence of their solicitor. I'll tell them that I'm going to caution them when the tape starts, I'm going to introduce the tape, etc. And then we're going to get into the reason why you're there. I'm going to ask you questions about it. Then what would happen is I would then turn on the interview recording. It would do a few beeps and then it will come up and say that it's recording. You can clearly see that it's recording. I would then explain the date, the time, who I was, where I worked, the reasons why we're here. I will ask you to confirm your name and then we will go through the caution. Okay, so then you'll be cautioned again and you will be explained as to what that caution means. And then the officer will then start asking you questions about the allegation and the investigation. This is where you can say really what you like. The solicitor will advise you on what to say or what not to say, but ultimately it's your police interview. If you feel that you should say something or shouldn't say something, then that's entirely up to you. Once the police interview has been concluded, you will be taken back to your cell for a period of time while the officers decide what to do next. And what can happen is you will either be no further actioned, allegation is dropped, police can't prove it, you're free to go. You will be released on bail, meaning that the police still have to do more investigation into the allegation. However, they can't do that in a time period where you're in the custody cell, so you'll be released on bail. Now, this goes on to the next thing. What could happen is a potential charge and remand. If the police have enough evidence to charge you then and there, then you'll be charged and you'll be given a court date with conditions, what you can and can't do. Or you will be charged and then you'll be remanded. A remand is when you are kept in police custody and you're not allowed to leave and you are going to court in the morning. This happens when a case is deemed so serious that you are unsafe to leave, or the police believe you would not answer bail or you would not attend court. There you have it. I hope this video was useful and I hope that you're never in this position. However, if you are, I hope that you're now a bit more prepared as to what you may or may not face. If you found this video useful, please subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. Comment your thoughts below and why don't you check out this video right here.